The state is the ultimate arbiter in every case of conflict that arises, including conflicts involving the state itself. Now, if you hear this type of definition, you immediately realize that this is a very unique type of institution. Just imagine that you get together with some friends and suggest that as a solution of social problems, in every case of conflict that I have with you, I will be the ultimate judge who is right and wrong, including also in cases of conflict that I start with you. This is why all states are interested in taxation. We all know that if we have a conflict with the state that the state has actually caused, it is agents of the state that then decide whether they were right in hitting you on the head or they were not right. And you can predict, of course, what their decision by and large will be. Taxation. If such an institution exists, and it does exist, then the consequence will be continuous expropriation and exploitation of property owners. So there is then an alternative source of income to the state besides taxes, and that is trying to gain control over the production of money itself. This is why all states are interested in taxation. We all know that if we have a conflict with the state that the state has actually caused, it is agents of the state that then decide whether they were right in hitting you on the head or they were not right. And you can predict, of course, what their decision by and large will be.
Hey, it's Jose Galison. You're watching No Way Jose. You can find me on No Way Jose YouTube channel, all the major auto podcatchers, and Odyssey as well. I want to give credit to Romero Synth. That's his YouTube channel. He's the one who did these hop waves, so you can go check him out if you want to see some more of those and some other stuff. He's got some other cool libertarian, whatever you call that genre, wave. I don't know, something like that. Vaporwave. That's what it is. Yeah. Go check him out for sure. Let him know I sent you. He said it was cool if I use his stuff. Not that I believe in IP anyways. Today, my guest is Toad. We're continuing our series on democracy, the god that failed. This is starting to get juicy. I read ahead on this one. So this is a fun one. That definitely should spark some conversation. I do want to let you guys know for Patreon purposes, I am now no longer doing the public live streams. Aside for my 4 Pony Boys series, and then maybe if I get huge guests or something, I don't know, but especially a current event thing, maybe I will, because I'm not gonna put it behind a paywall and wait a week because no one gives a shit by the time it comes out. But I don't normally cover current events, so this shouldn't be an issue. So mostly speaking, 90+% of my content will be behind the paywall, and by what I mean by that, not permanently. Like I said, it'll still be similar. I'm just no longer doing the public live stream. So if you want to be able to have access to live stream, there's a live stream right now, but you got to be a patron. So it's patreon.com, it's just No Way Jose 2020. What'll happen is after I do the live stream, roughly about a week or so later, depending on how my schedule of what I'm dropping goes, it'll come out. It'll be public at that point. So if you want to be able to get access to stuff earlier, it's only the lowest is $2. It's all you got to do is $2 a month, and that'll get you access to that. I have other levels of 5, 10, 20. The $20 is a sponsor. The other ones have perks too, but for the sake of time, I'm not going to list it. If you want to know, I'll let you. I'll let you know. It says it at the Patreon as well. But the highest level is 20. Those are my sponsors. I'll read them off every episode. I have Mikkel Thorup of the Expat Money Show. If you want to get the hell out of the country, he's your guy. He has as a podcast and as a business. He will literally hold your hand through the process. I also have Jeremy, who has an Etsy shop, etsy.com/shop/raising liberty. And you can follow him on Twitter at Jeremy Rhymes. And Toad, my guest, you can follow him at TPH_Toad, and he is a co-host for Tower Power Hour. Actually, not Tower Power anymore. It's Tower Gang. We rebranded, and so am I. So if you want to see me and Toad, it's also Clint Russell, Reed Coverdale, TopLobsta, Fat Dave. It's a boy band podcast essentially. But if you like offensive comedy done in a subpar way, we're your guys with a little bit of libertarian theory mixed in occasionally. If anything, we usually use that for some of our sources of humor. Do dirty libertarian jokes that only libertarians would get. So it's a fun show. I highly suggest checking it out. But yeah, with that, let's go ahead. Oh yeah, TopLobsta.com. You're supposed to get checkout for 10% off. You can get my merch. You can get Tower Gang merch. You can get Liberty Lockdown. Naturalist Capitalist, Break the Cycle, a bunch of other stuff. He also has stuff that's not show related. You can go check that out. I highly suggest it. He also does merch for like Legion of Skanks, stuff like that. He's a fucking dude. But enough bloviating about him. Let's get Toad in here. Hey, what's up, man?
What's up? Yeah, that's right. We at Tower Gang now. We are a boy band, and we're just about as gay as one. So
hell yeah, dude.
And I'm Tower Gang Toad now. I rebranded my Twitter as well. So
hell yeah, hell yeah. I'm looking forward. He's Top's rebranding like the aesthetics as well too. I like the new aesthetics he's got. He's already got you a PFP with kind of similar aesthetic. He's gonna make one for each one of us. I'm looking forward to it. So. It's like every time I get nuked off Twitter, Top makes me a new one. It's been a minute, so I'm feeling a little jealous right now. I just have something Dicky threw together right now as some Photoshop thing.
Yeah.
But I guess enough jerking the chain. People are here to listen to Hoppe. Are you ready to get into it? We're on the third chapter on monarchy, democracy, public opinion, and delegitimation.
Yeah, I am sad, by the way, that you're not doing public live streams anymore. I'm like, why is the viewer count lower than it was on the other episodes? Like, what's going on, man?
Yeah, I was telling you before, I think it really probably fucks me for the algos for YouTube because I think the more because essentially I end up releasing two versions because I have the public live stream, I take it down, and I have to re-upload it later. So it's like
that's true.
Yeah, it seems like the algorithm on YouTube is like the more views you get, the more likely you get more views. It's almost like a sort of exponential, maybe not exponential is not the right word. So it kind of like screws me over. But and also I just want to provide more incentive for my patrons and
fair enough.
Actually something, So but well, let's get into this, man.
Yeah.
It is appropriate to begin with a few observations on Ludwig von Mises and his idea of a free society. The program of liberalism, wrote Mises, is, if condensed into a single word, would have to read property, that is, private ownership of the means of production, for in regard to commodities ready for consumption, private property is a matter of course and is not disputed even by the socialists and communists. All the other demands of liberalism result from this fundamental demand. Based on private property, Mises explained, the emergence of society, human cooperation was the result of the natural diversity of a people and property, and the recognition that work performed under division of labor is more productive than work performed in self-sufficient isolation. He explained, if and as far as labor under the division of labor is more productive than isolated labor, and if and as far as man is able to realize this fact, human action itself tends towards cooperation and association. Experience teaches that this condition, higher productivity achieved under division of labor, is present because it's caused the inborn inequality of men and the inequality in the geographical distribution of the natural factors of production is real. Thus, we are in a position to comprehend the course of social evolution.
Yeah, those are some good Mises quotes there, which is interesting because, there are certain things in liberalism that I kind of take issue with that Mises says, but he is really good on most things. And the people that like make fun of the classical liberal types that make fun of the Mises caucus and will like throw out all these like Mises quotes that seem to be in opposition to like the Mises caucus types, they like completely ignore stuff like this, where Mises is, like basically saying that humans are inherently unequal, and that's why you need division of labor and things like that. And it's very capitalistic. And I mean, he's just he's saying that equality is not natural, basically, which is kind of a Rothbardian point to make as well. So
it is. It's a common thing that certain ilk, especially us like Rothbardian ANCAP types, especially the classical liberal types, will take these little clips of quotes that Mises said and try to throw it in our face of like how his support of democracy and other things. And what the portion, a lot of the stuff we're going to be reading in this stuff is essentially, in some regards, a rebuttal to a lot of that. And it makes you, because what Mises was talking about with his idea of democracy was a little bit different. And I mean, we'll definitely get into it, as we're reading this, because Hoppe really breaks down like why these people are kind of retarded, essentially. Like, we'll continue to get into that.
I don't know if there's anything else to say there, but just like, I mean, talking about the division of labor, basically implying that humans need to cooperate, implying that there needs to be a hierarchy of some kind, just sort of along the Hoppian natural elites way of thinking, I guess, if you want to consider it to be that way. Like, different humans have different skill sets, so you want to allow them to be able to focus on those things, essentially, and find what their niche is, essentially, and do what they are good at and cooperate that way.
If the emergence of society, human cooperation under division of labor can be explained as a result of self-interested action, it is also true that mankind being what it is, murderers, robbers, thieves, thugs, and con artists will always exist. And life in society will be intolerable unless they are threatened with physical punishment. The liberal understands quite well, wrote Mises. I guess before I continue with the Mises quote, I mean, it is a good point to point out, the life in society will be intolerable unless they're threatened with physical punishment, which it sounds like a statist concept in his head, but then you realize, like, no, he's just talking about property infringements and the idea of that you're able to protect your property, and your property is essentially, protected by violence, whether you delegate that role to the state or do it yourself. It's at the end of the day, all property rights, in a certain like realistic sense, they kind of don't exist if you aren't going to do anything about it. It's kind of like, okay, cool, you have property rights, but are you going to actually do anything about it? Like, I mean it more like the egoistic sense. Like, I'm not saying like, in a Rothbardian sense, they exist. I just more mean like, of what use are property rights if you don't enforce them?
Right. Well, exactly. And I mean, that seems to be kind of like one of the divisions amongst like the liberty sphere that's going on right now, especially like in the age of COVID, where you have some people that kind of just focus on like the theory aspect of it. And it's like, well, you have these property rights. And it's like, well, yes, like, inherently, yes, like you do have these rights, but those rights can be taken away from you unless you're prepared to defend them.
Yep.
So, and that's, I think, kind of the stance that like I take, and I guess that you take as well, where it's like, like if somebody is, threatening me, I'm going to defend myself, All right,
let's continue this Mises quote. That without resort to compulsion, the existence of society would be endangered, and that behind the rules of conduct whose observance is necessary to assure peaceful human cooperation must stand the threat of force. If the whole edifice of society is not to be continually at the mercy of any one of its members, one must be in a position to compel the person who will not respect the lives, health, personal liberty, or private property of others to acquiesce in the rules of life in society. This is the function that a liberal doctrine assigns to the state, the protection of property, liberty, and peace. And all right, so right there, you just broke down kind of your standard boilerplate understanding of the purpose of government, which I would say even a lot of us ANCAPs, in theory, if a government only did that, then it would be a just government, and it would be nothing. Really, there wouldn't be anything to impose, because if they were actually respecting property rights, I mean, we as like ANCAPs understand then that's not really a fucking government. So it's kind of a conundrum in and of itself. But essentially, if a state actually did that, if there was an entity that all it did was protect property, liberty, and peace or whatever, then it's like, okay, like we have nothing to complain about. And this is the utopian idea of like I guess like your constitutionalists,
right? Exactly. Like this is the idea. That the ideas that the U.S. were founded upon essentially, and that did not work out so well.
Yeah,
but
yes, and in a certain sense, that's even what we want. We want an entity that, whether it be us, some sort of association that we're a part of, or a community, or whatever ends up being, we want something that protects property.
Yes,
whether that's you being a self-sufficient person in the woods because that's how you want to live, or you want to be part of this HOA-esque anarcho society where it's like everyone agreed to a contract, to abide under certain rules. If they come in live in this area, then okay, it's that you have your options. So,
right. And I think it's kind of like, I mean, the fundamental understanding here is essentially how like a government is going to grow itself and how a government actually operates. Like a government is essentially not going to adhere to just that. However, we can still prefer that if a government exists, it will behave in that manner because that is closer to what like a private like defense agency or something would be doing. So,
if this is accepted, how is a government to be organized so as to assure that it will in fact do what it is supposed to do? Protect pre-existing private property rights. In view of what I shall say later on in favor of the institution of monarchy, Mises's liberal opposition to the ancient regime of absolute kings and princes is worth noting here. Kings and princes were privileged personae. Almost by definition, they stood opposed to the liberal idea of the unity and universality of law. Thus, Mises stated, the liberal theory of the state is hostile to princes. The princely state has no natural boundaries. This is Mises speaking, by the way. To be an increaser of his family estate is the ideal of the prince. He strives to leave his successor more land than he inherited from his father. To keep on acquiring new possessions until one encounters an equally strong or stronger adversary. That is the striving of kings. Princes regard countries no differently from the way an estate owner regards his forests, meadows, and fields. They sell them, they exchange them, and each time rule over the inhabitants is transferred also. Lands and people are, in the eyes of princes, nothing but objects of princely ownership. The former form the basis of sovereignty. The latter, the appurtenances, that's a weird word, of land ownership. From the people who live in his land, the prince demands obedience and loyalty. He regards them almost as his property. I do want to respond to that. I feel like the Hoppian answer to that is yes. Because if you read it, he is saying that a prince regards this as his property, and like obviously not good to be regarded as a human as someone else's property because we regard ourselves as our own property. But the point Hoppe makes is it's preferable because at least a monarchy treats its state as a property and has these economic incentives to generally make it kind of better. Although it does have some issues, I guess in a sense you could say the same economic calculation problem to some extent, just not to the same degree as democracy. But in a democracy, these are more caretakers. They don't have this vested interest in to grow this thing economically so that they can sift more off. If anything's a temporary thing, they just want to take as much money off of it while they can.
Right. So this is about to get interesting, I'm pretty sure, because like that quote from Mises right there, I think is something that Hoppe would agree with.
Yeah.
That yes, like this monarchy, this is a state. He's talking about how the monarch will attempt to, he'll sort of treat the property like it's his private property. He'll want to pass it on to his heirs. He might want to grow that thing. Like, yes. However, I think as Hoppe is about to point out here, Mises then starts to draw like incorrect conclusions from this. And he starts, I believe, promoting democracy as an answer to this, whereas Hoppe would say that that's actually, he doesn't agree with that. That's a step away.
Well, he does and he doesn't. I don't mean to spoil a little bit, but because I did read ahead, and I mean, I know you've read this before, but you don't remember.
I have. I don't remember this exactly.
I just read this like a few days ago. But I mean, although I've read it before, but he gets into the point of, but what does Mises mean by democracy? Mises does not mean, when he says democracy, he's not meaning what the classical liberals that try to throw this in Hoppian's faces. They don't mean the same. Like Mises did not mean the same thing as them, and we'll cover that.
Well, yeah. So of course, the classical liberal types are also, they're going to be taking Mises out of context in various cases as well. Yeah. So,
yep. As Mises rejected a princely state as incompatible with the protection of private property rights, what was to be substituted for it? His answer was democracy and democratic government. However, Mises's definition of democratic government is fundamentally different from its colloquial meaning. Okay. Mises grew up in a multinational state and was painfully aware of the anti-liberal results of majority rule in ethnically mixed territories. Rather than majority rule, to Mises, democracy meant literally self-determination, self-government, self-rule. And accordingly, a democratic government was an essentially voluntary membership of organization in that it recognized each of its constituents' unrestricted right to secession. So that is the key point. Like, he regarded democracy, and ironically, we at one point, we in the royal we as like the United States did, and the Civil War at one point, the Civil War changed all that. You could make an argument that we had something close to what Mises wanted at that point, sort of, maybe. I don't know.
Right. So, Mises, as we know, Mises is like a minarchist. So, I mean, perhaps he was more of like in favor of like the constitutional, like the U.S., like sort of like republic that was established, at its founding, essentially, like something like that would be more of like the Misesian preference, I suppose. But one of the points here is that Mises definitely was in favor of secession, which is something that, of course, these like classical liberal types are just going to ignore that because they like to shit on secession all the time. So
which Mises, I haven't read nearly enough Mises. I've read a couple of his books, but especially the way Hoppe is characterizing him, he's one of those minarchists that's it sounds like, if especially the way he's about to continue to explain what he believes with what his description of democracy is, he's essentially an anarchist. Like, he's one of those things where like it's kind of like minarchists who are like, well, I just want everything to be voluntary, but I still want a government. And you're like, okay, well, that's not a government. So it's kind of the same idea with what Mises is saying, because he supports secession down to the individual. And at that point, it's essentially like, if anyone can leave and it's completely voluntary, we can quibble over semantics and be like, well, no, this is technically minarchism, this is technically anarchism. It's like, all right, well, we're basically talking about the same thing at this point, so who cares what we call it?
Right. You could kind of say the same thing about Ron Paul, really.
Yes. Yeah. All right. Liberalism, explained Mises, forces no one against his will into the structure of the state. Whoever wants to emigrate is not held back. And when a part of the people of a state wants to drop out of the union, liberalism does not hinder it from doing so. Colonies that want to become independent need only do so. The nation as an organic entity can be neither increased nor reduced by changes in states. The world as a whole can neither win nor lose from them. The right of self-determination in regard to the question of membership in a state thus means, whenever the inhabitants of a particular territory, whether it be a single village, a whole district, or a series of adjacent districts, make it known by a freely conducted plebiscite that they no longer wish to remain united to the state to which they belong at the time, their wishes are to be respected and complied with. This is the only feasible and effective way of preventing revolutions and international wars. If it were any way possible to grant this right of self-determination to every individual person, it would have to be done. So there you go. So all the classical liberals who use Mises thrown in your face, I want people to, anyone listening to this, remember this aspect. These are word games people play. People who don't really understand what they're talking about, they just try to take little snapshots of different thinkers and try to use it to fit their given narrative.
Oh, they would never do that.
Words take on different meanings over time, and that can make a huge difference. Because, for example, Mises talks about liberalism a lot. How he defines liberalism, I guarantee you, is not the same way most people define liberalism now. How he defines democracy is not the same way people define democracy now. He was pro-secession, and most of the people who try to uphold Mises as to promote minarchy or democracy or what have you, they miss this key point. Once the secession thing is gone, it fucks it all up. So I just think it's a key point to keep in mind, because this will, I guarantee you, if you're ever getting an argument with one of these types, this will be something that can come in handy if they try to throw Mises in your face.
Right. And yeah, these types that refer to themselves as classical liberals also, I would say, don't even adhere to classical liberalism, as you're kind of saying. They don't really fully agree. They don't even come close to fully agreeing with Mises, because they ignore all the secession stuff and the stuff that you just pointed out. But they are like closer to progressives, whereas Mises, I guess, would probably be more like along the lines of, I don't even know, like if you would say he'd be more similar to like Bastiat or somebody like that, like more along like the classical liberal lines. I do think that Mises still, was getting some things wrong, where I think he put like too much faith in that type of system and like didn't really like realize how out of control it was going to grow, maybe is the way that I would put it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, you got to think he was one of the trailblazers of his line of thinking, and he was an early one. So,
yeah.
I mean, every one of these subsequent thinkers have put on different spins. Like you had Mises, who, and then Rothbard expanded on his
Rothbard.
insights to create, more Rothbardian. Hoppe expanded on Rothbard. Really, I would even say Konkin expounded on Rothbard, going a slightly different way than Hoppe. I'm sure there will be, thinkers in the future that expand on Hoppe. Find different. I mean, you could probably say that with somebody like maybe like Kinsella or somebody. I don't know. I'm trying to think of a name that come to mind, like a student or something.
Yeah, maybe like one of the other like things that I take issue with Mises. I don't know if it comes up in this book here, but he also like would point out that democracy like lent itself to a more like peaceful. He almost said it right there in that quote there, like more peaceful transfer of power, which I don't really agree with. So.
Well, I mean, once again, the key distinction being if you're assuming in this government you have the secession aspect. So I think that would make a huge difference.
It's also kind of, compared to what is kind of the question, but yeah.
All right, let's finish this little section. There's a little summary or a little like a conclusion to this section, and I'll pass it off to you.
All right.
Hence, Mises' answer as to how to assure that a government will protect property rights is through the threat of unlimited secession and its own characteristic of voluntary membership. All right, on to you. On to you, Joe. Yeah.
All right. So now, all right, yeah. So that last section, we were already back to Hoppe talking there. So we were done with the Mises quote already.
Yes.
All right. I do not wish to further investigate Mises' ideas of democratic government here, but to turn instead to the modern definition of democracy and the question of its compatibility with the foundation of liberalism, that of private property and its protection. So as he was, pointing out before, as I believe Mises would agree with, private property is kind of the root of all. I mean that's the root of libertarian thinking. It's the root of property ownership, the root of morality, essentially. So, yeah. All right. It might be argued that Mises' definition of democratic government was applicable to the U.S. until 1861. So like you said, until the Civil War broke out, essentially. Until then, it was generally held that the right to secession existed and that the Union was nothing but a voluntary association of independent states. However, after the crushing defeat and devastation of the secessionist Confederacy by Lincoln and the Union, it was clear that the right to secede no longer existed and that democracy meant absolute and unlimited majority rule. Nor does it appear that any state since that time has met Mises' definition of democratic government. Instead, like their American model, all modern democracies are compulsory membership organizations.
Yeah, much the same that we were talking about earlier. I don't think there's much to say there.
Right. However, so Mises, because Mises escaped Nazi Germany, right? So his time period was like the mid 1900s, essentially. So he was alive well after this had happened, but I guess didn't really, I don't know, make that observation, I guess, about the Civil War being a real turning point, as Hoppe points out in this book repeatedly, that it was really when centralization of power started happening in the U.S.
Yeah, I have a feeling he probably addressed it somewhere at some point. I don't.
Yeah, I have not read enough Mises to answer that, but yeah. It's all the more surprising that Mises never subjected this modern model of democracy to the same systematic analysis that he had applied to princely government. So Hoppe is kind of saying that there. To be sure, no one has been more farsighted regarding the destructive effects of modern government's social and economic policies than Mises. And no one has recognized more clearly the dramatic increase of state power in the course of the 20th century. But Mises never connected these phenomena systematically with modern compulsory democracy. Nowhere did he suggest that the decline of liberalism and the dominance of anti-capitalist political ideologies in this century of socialism, social democracy, democratic capitalism, social market economics, or whatever other label has been attached to various anti-liberal programs and policies finds its systematic explanation in majoritarian democracy itself.
Yep.
So now he is saying that Mises sort of failed to apply that, which is kind of what I was getting at, sort of failed to apply that line of thinking to what we were observing with the growth of the U.S. and the growth of different Western states, essentially.
Yeah, I'll generally defer to Hoppe on that. I'm sure he has a better knowledge of Mises's work than I do. But
yes.
Maybe there's some Mises individual out there that would agree, disagree, and be like, well, he said this here and blah blah blah. I don't know. But it does seem to be, once again, no one's perfect. I'm sure I could find things I disagree with Rothbard on. So
I think Hoppe is basically saying that Mises kind of never really wrote about that. I think is kind of what he's saying there.
Yeah, maybe. All right.
Not that he was necessarily wrong, but that he didn't address it.
Yeah.
All right. I forget. I was just gonna point out that so Hoppe is still kind of holding on to the real classical definition of liberalism, whereas I think that at this point it should just kind of be thrown out because everybody just associates the current definition of liberalism with it, which is really anti-liberal, as Hoppe does point out here. So I just don't really find much use in using that term anymore, other than to describe the neoliberal progressives. But All right, what I propose to do here is to fill in the gap left by Mises and provide an analysis of the logic of majoritarian democracy, thereby making modern history, our age, intelligible and predictable.
I do want to point out real quick, nowhere has Hoppe disagreed with Mises necessarily.
Right.
Because he agreed with his position on monarchy.
Correct.
But he's just saying it's preferable to democracy. He still thinks it's not good.
Right.
It's definitely, an affront to the, to private property.
Definitely agrees with them on secession. Yeah.
Yep. But all right.
Without the right to secession, a democratic government is, economically speaking, a compulsory territorial monopolist of protection and ultimate decision-making, jurisdiction, and is in this respect indistinguishable from princely government. Just as princes did not allow secession, so it is outlawed under democracy. Furthermore, as implied in the position of a compulsory monopolist, both democratic government as well as princes possess the right to tax. That is, both are permitted to determine unilaterally, without consent of the protected, the sum that the protected must pay for their own protection.
Yep.
From this common classification as compulsory monopolies, a fundamental similarity of both princely and democratic government can be deduced. Under monopolistic auspices, the price of justice and protection will continually rise, and the quantity and quality of justice and protection fall. Qua expropriating property protector, a tax-funded protection agency is a contradiction in terms and will inevitably lead to more taxes and less protection. Even if, as liberals advocate, a government limited its activities exclusively to the protection of pre-existing property rights, the further question of how much protection to produce arises. Motivated as everyone is by self-interest and the disutility of labor, but with the unique power to tax, a government agent's response will invariably be the same: to maximize expenditures on protection, and conceivably almost all of a nation's wealth can be consumed by the cost of protection, and at the same time to minimize the actual production of protection. The more money one can spend and the less one must work to produce, the better off one will be.
Yeah, to put that in layman's terms, essentially, by getting rid of the right of secession, it is de facto become a monopolistic thing. And he was saying it's no different than monarchies in that way. And he brings it to protection and the idea that the state is in most ways is a monopoly and protection. I mean, I guess you could say there are private, people you can pay to protect yourself, but you're also getting money stolen for that purpose. So it's like you're less able to afford such things, yada, yada, yada. But the point is, functionally speaking, it is the only ones generally with cops, with courts, whatever, what have you. And so the idea being it's a monopoly. And now if it's a monopoly, if it's the only business in town and it is able to, reduce prices, raise prices, reduce quality, increase quality at its own whim, I mean, I'm sure, a lot of people would be like, well, they couldn't just, make it entirely awful tomorrow. Yeah, I mean, it's like the boiling frog thing. You can't do it immediately overnight. You might end up with some issues. But point being is, generally speaking, you have no recourse if they increase the price, they decrease the quality. And so if anything, because you have no recourse, they have no reason not to. So like this is one, a lot of things, this is probably one of the biggest things that people who still latch onto government miss is the concept of incentives. They have every incentive. That doesn't mean in every single occasion they will do this thing. It just means the trend over time is that it will do this because these are the way the incentives point. They have every incentive to do it. They have almost no incentives to going the other way. So,
right. Yeah. There was, a lot. As you said, this is a pretty meaty chapter here. And there was kind of a lot in there. Like Hoppe offers like one of his most negative points about a monarchy in that paragraph or a couple of paragraphs that I just read there, where he points out that a monarchy was still opposed to secession and like basically wouldn't let you do it. Like you couldn't like break off from that monarchical state and create your own state, really. Or maybe it might have been easier to do that. You'd have to do it with like some amount of force, and there'd probably be force attempted against you if you wanted to do that. But his point, I believe, would be that because the monarchy grows much more slowly than this like Western democracy type of government that grows and centralizes itself way quicker, that the monarchies kind of remain smaller and they compete with each other. So you, like as an individual, it'd be easier for you to like leave one and go to another, essentially. So they kind of had to compete with each other. And he's made the point, like in this book, that these monarchies kind of would like be more incentivized to not go to war with each other and not like try to like confiscate each other's territory, but more, like engage in more like trade and like deals and stuff like that with the other ones and stuff like that. So, all of that comes to mind there. And then he's talking about, he sort of hinted that Mises got something wrong there with kind of the fact that Mises was kind of promoting like that, sort of like the U.S. like constitutional form of government, if you want to look at it that way, like a small government that is there to just protect property. And I think Hoppe would definitely agree that if a government were to do that, that would be preferable to any other form of government, essentially, but that it is just not in the government's nature to do that and remain that way. As he's pointing out here, the government is going to use like constant fear tactics, as of course we see recently with COVID and all this shit. It's always like, shove fear down everybody's throats and we will protect you from this.
Yep.
And
all right, you want to go? Oh, sorry.
It's able to grow itself rapidly that way.
All right, you want to finish this section since it's only one paragraph, then I'll take us to the end after that.
Sure. Moreover, a monopoly of jurisdiction will inevitably lead to a steady deterioration in the quality of protection. If one can appeal exclusively to government for justice, justice will be distorted in favor of government. In favor of government, constitutions and appeals courts. Will be distorted in favor of government, constitutions and appeal courts notwithstanding. Constitutions and appeals courts are government constitutions. Wow, he's wording this a little strangely. All right. Constitutions and appeals courts are government constitutions and agencies, and any limitations on government action they might provide are invariably decided by agents of one and the same institution. Predictably, the definition of property and protection will continually be altered and the range of jurisdiction expanded to the government's advantage.
Yeah, so, the key line in there is any limitations on government action they might provide are invariably decided by agents of one and the same institution. Right. That's one of the main things, one of the illusions, the things we're taught in grade school is checks and balances. We have the executive, the judicial, and we have I'm having a brain for legislative. It's like these are all ones, and they check each other with power. But it's like at the end of the day, they work for the same institution.
Yes.
Like I get it. Like they have different roles, so they will at times be at odds, and they will at times check each other because they are to some extent different entities. But at the end of the day, they work for the same institution, and generally speaking, there will be a bias in that direction. There is no way to avoid that. There's no way to avoid that whatsoever. So over the long course of time, it will deteriorate. Like, yes, like the Supreme Court will occasionally, and they usually are fairly decent about coming in and enforcing stuff in the way they probably should, generally speaking. They haven't been good on everything. They've been awful on a lot of shit. But, they every now and then they come in with a clinch. And you're like, oh, hell yeah. But over time, it slowly deteriorates,
Yeah, it really, it depends on the makeup of the Supreme Court, of course. And actually, like that was actually one of the only good things that Trump did was be able to get like 3 judges appointed there to take the majority of the Supreme Court, which is like the reason why Roe v. Wade was thrown out and stuff like that, which I did not expect that to happen. So like there were, and I think there was a good like gun control decision that was handed down by that Supreme Court as well. So like very occasionally, but I would say for the most part, they're awful. And I think this is a point that Rothbard makes in Anatomy of the State, where he's talking about how the Constitution is not going to work. It's not going to limit the exact same government that is interpreting it. Like they'll be able to interpret it the way they want. And this is, where you have the Supreme Court for a long time now saying, well, the Constitution is a living, breathing document, basically totally loosely interpreting it and saying we can interpret this like any way we want with, the general welfare clause and all these other things. Like some of those things that just get taken, totally out of control, even though if you were familiar with the Constitution, like what the founding fathers are actually intended. Like there really is only like one way to interpret some of these things.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, law is what is enforced. So like they're like, oh, it's a living document. In a certain way, they're kind of right because they're the ones who get to interpret it and they're the ones who get to enforce it. So in a certain sense, they're kind of right.
And the other thing Hoppe is talking about here is one of his like specialties, where he has books that are specifically on this topic of defense production. And he's saying that, of course, a government becomes a monopoly on the production of defense and you have nowhere else to go. So they're not incentivized to provide quality. There is no way to, hold them accountable for this. So it's pretty obvious and inevitable that they're going to fail at doing that.
Yep. While they are both inconsistent with the protection of life and property, princely and democratic government are also different in one fundamental respect. The decisive difference lies in the fact that entry into a princely government is systematically restricted by the prince's personal discretion, while under democracy, entry into and participation in government is open to everyone on equal terms. Anyone not just a hereditary class of nobles is permitted to become a government official and exercise any government function, all the way up to that of prime minister or president. Typically, the distinction between restricted versus free entry into government and the transition from princely to democratic government has been interpreted as an advance towards liberalism, from a society of status and privilege to one of equality before the law. But this interpretation rests on a fundamental misunderstanding. From a classical liberal point of view, democratic government must be considered worse than in a regression from princely government. I don't know if you have anything to add at this point. We'll keep going.
I mean, he's made the point already about sort of like the entry into government, where with the democratic government, where there are way more people in the government, the entry into the government becomes easier, like for anybody to do it, whereas the monarch would be like severely restricting to like just his family essentially or something like that. And Hoppe is saying that is or at least very in many cases can be preferable to democracy. The thing about democracy, I guess I would say that it's sort of like not necessarily everybody can get into it, but like it's everybody that buys into it, if that makes sense. Like as we're sort of seeing in the recent years, where there's this huge push, from the corporate press and stuff like that, that these certain people who obviously don't totally buy into this, like they're unacceptable. They cannot hold these positions of power,
Yeah, there's still a class divide for sure.
Oh yeah.
Just the idea is they try to blur the class divide to the greatest degree they can possible.
Exactly. Yeah. They do that like in people's minds, especially. Yeah. So it's the thought, that anybody can get into these positions. Yeah.
When in reality, that doesn't play out in reality.
Yeah, and we are ruling ourselves. Yeah.
Yes.
Sure.
Free and equal entry into government, democratic equality is something entirely different from and incompatible with the classical liberal concept of one universal law, equally applicable to everyone, everywhere, and at all times. Liberalism, Mises noted, strives for the greatest possible unification of law in the last analysis for world unity of law. However, free entry into government does not accomplish this goal. To the contrary, the objectionable inequality of the higher law of princes versus subordinate law of ordinary subjects is preserved under democracy in the separation of public versus private law and the supremacy of the former over the latter. Under democracy, everyone is equal insofar as entry into government is open to all in the same terms. In a democracy, no personal privileges or privileged persons exist. However, functional privileges and privileged functions exist. As long as they act in an official capacity, democratic government agents are governed and protected by public law and thereby occupy a privileged position vis-a-vis persons acting under the mere authority of private law. Most fundamentally in being permitted to support their own activities by taxes and imposed on private law subjects. Privileges, discrimination, and protectionism do not disappear. To the contrary, rather than being restricted to princes and nobles, privileges, discrimination, and protection can be exercised by and accorded to everyone. It's a good point. It's a really good point. I like the way you laid it out. Head scratch. You had to think about that one, right?
Yeah. I might have to think about that one a little bit.
Yeah. No. I like it because it was kind of what we were talking about before. The idea that they give you the idea that the democracy kind of fools you into thinking that there are these separate classes where one and the same.
Yeah.
It blurs the lines, whereas he's making the point that's not the case. And like technically, in a certain sense, there are no personal privileges or privileged persons, although there kind of are. He's talking about the roles, the functions, the senator, the president, the soldier, the cop, the whatever. Right. They are governed by different rules.
Yeah, exactly. So if that's his point here, I would assume is that the people that get into these positions of power, they become above the law. So they essentially have a different set of laws that they need to abide by than the rest of us. If that's what he's saying, then that's definitely true.
Yes, that's exactly what he's saying. He's saying there are privileged roles. It's the role that gives it to you. So the point being is that because he was kind of getting at that liberalism strives for the greatest possible unification of law, the concept of one universal law equally applicable to everyone, everywhere, and at all times. That is not the case. If anything, it made it more perverse because now essentially the privileges, discrimination, protection can be last line can be exercised by and accorded to everyone. So now everyone theoretically has the ability to be able to exercise these, discriminatory or being unequal in a law type sense. So
So essentially, like having a global set of laws, like the question I guess would be like, well, who is enforcing that? Like if it is a global government and they're deciding what these laws are, and that's the worst possible situation that you can imagine.
It's kind of like a boomer gun control people. They'll bring this point, and it's a good point. They'll be like, well, you're going to take away my guns. You're going to take away the cops' guns. You can take away the military guns. It's like, it's a good point. Like it's the point that they're making here. It's like when they enforce these rules, they don't apply to them. So
I think in this like sort of classical liberal view, I think the sort of the thinking there would be that this like global set of laws is sort of like there are like just these specific like private property laws essentially that actually apply to everybody in the world, which is essentially like just core libertarianism. Like everybody has the right to life and to property and property ownership and stuff like that. But of course, when you have a government, that is not going to be the law that they are enforcing, you know?
Yes, the government's always going to be held to a different standard.
Right.
And not a higher one.
Yeah.
Predictably, under democratic conditions, the tendency of every compulsory monopoly to increase prices and decrease quality is strengthened. As a hereditary monopolist, a prince regards the territory and people under his jurisdiction as his personal property and engages in the monopolistic exploitation of his property. Under democracy, exploitation does not disappear. Even though everyone is permitted to enter government, this does not eliminate the distinction between the rulers and the ruled. Mm-hmm. Government and the governed are not one and the same person. Instead of a prince who considers the country his private property, a temporary and interchangeable caretaker is put in monopolistic charge. The caretaker does not own the country, but as long as he is in office, he is permitted to use it to his and his protégé's advantage. He owns its current usufruct, whatever the fuck that means, but not its capital stock. This does not eliminate exploitation. Rather, it makes exploitation less calculating and carried out with little or no regard to the capital stock. In other words, it is short-sighted. So once again, makes it worse. So
yeah, usufruct is, I guess, the right to enjoy the use and advantages of another's property short of the destruction or waste of its substance.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good word in regards to here. Well, all right, that worked here. that really does work to explain monarchy to some extent. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that one. That was a very dense paragraph, a lot in there as well.
Yeah, sort of. He's kind of saying what we just said, where like there is definitely this distinction still between. And I mean, this is one of the main points that he makes over and over again throughout this book, which is one of the great points in this book is that there is still definitely this distinction between the ruling class and the ruled class. It's just that in the democracy, those lines are blurred completely so that people don't see what they are.
Yeah,
essentially.
And they think it's better. Like, well, if any one of us can get in here, we can make things better. And it's like, no, if anything, it makes it worse. It makes the evil the government imposes accessible to more people, and it really makes things worse in a lot of ways. Both hereditary princes and democratic caretakers can increase their current spending by means of higher taxes. However, a prince tends to avoid increasing taxes if this leads to capital consumption, a drop in the present discounted value of the capital stock of which he is the owner. In contrast, a caretaker shows no such reluctance. While he owns the present tax revenue, he does not own the capital stock from which it's derived. Others do. Accordingly, under democratic conditions, taxation increases far beyond its level under princely rule. We've covered this a lot. I don't feel like we need a commentary of that paragraph.
Yeah, I mean, unless people are just going to watch like this chapter, these episodes as like a one-off, like, I don't know. So basically, I mean, I guess we kind of said it already tonight that like in the monarchy, like they're going to sort of be incentivized to spend less or like waste less of what they have because they have heirs to pass it on to. I think it's essentially the point that he's making again there.
Yes. In addition, both princes and caretakers can increase their current spending by means of debt. And endowed with the power to tax, both tend to incur more debt than would private citizens. However, whereas a prince assumes a liability against his personal property whenever he borrows from the non-governmental public, a democratic caretaker is free of any such consideration. He can enjoy all the benefits of higher current spending while the liability and concurrent drop in property values falls upon others. Accordingly, a government debt is higher and increases faster under democratic conditions than under princely rule. I like that one sentence. He can enjoy all the benefits of higher current spending while the liability and concurrent drop in property values falls upon others. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. So, in the democratic form of government, the ruling class can, just spend all of that. They can, enjoy all the benefits of that while it's the taxpayers, the public essentially is left, paying for all of it.
Yeah, a larger amount of positives and less negatives on their part. You know, as long as they don't go too buck wild with it, end up on a pike kind of deal. But
right. Whereas I think Hoppe would say, like in the monarchic system, like if the monarch is spending too much of what he has or whatever, I guess enjoying all those benefits, it actually might be like detrimental, more like to himself and to his heirs. So
yeah, I mean, you're going to cause more unrest within your thing. There's a, like he brings up, there's a bigger divide between the rulers and the ruled in a monarchy, because they don't have this idea of like that we are the government. So you're more likely to see some sort of, guillotine type action or something. So in the short term, it can cause him problems. Also in the long term, it can cause him problems because he's just going to create economic problems in the later. He's going to lose some land. He's going to have to, it's not going to work out well for him. Whereas it makes all the more sense for him to operate better than a democracy. Still not, perfectly, because an entity ruled by one person is, he's only one person. So
yeah.
Finally, both princes and caretakers can use their compulsory monopoly power to gain control over the money supply. So both can also increase their own present spending by inflating the supply of money. However, a prince who inflates the money supply will weigh two factors: his immediate enrichment and the fact that, as the inevitable result of a larger money supply, the future purchasing power of money and of his own future taxes will be lower. Unlike a prince, a democratic caretaker is concerned only with his immediate enrichment, for he does not own current and future tax revenues. He only owns the present tax revenue, so he is solely concerned with the present purchasing power of money. By increasing the money supply, he can increase his present purchasing power, while the intended lower purchasing power of money and tax receipts must be borne in the future of others or by others. Accordingly, money inflation will also be more prevalent under democratic conditions than under princely rule. All right, anything to add? This is where we're going to kill it at this part.
Yeah, that's probably a good place to kill it. But yeah, that there was a lot in that. So we're doing half of this chapter essentially tonight, and then the other half, next episode, and then we'll be done with chapter 3 in 2 episodes. But yeah, the that paragraph again, like there's a lot of meat to this chapter, and for the first time tonight, maybe we're going to say this is definitely he's talking about time preference here, because he does apply time preference to his arguments throughout this whole book, and he's applying it to money printing here, which is interesting because of course when the money supply gets inflated, this is the Cantillon effect basically, which we see happening now with the US government printing all this money. The first people that get that money, they're going to be able to use that money and spend it right now, while before it has impacted prices. So inflation is the increase in the money supply, and it is not actually increase in prices, which is a result of the inflation. So these first people, and in this case, in the US, it's going to be the politically connected people, the big banks, like whoever, like these people get the money first. They can spend that money before prices have increased all across the board. And then by the time that like ripples throughout the economy, the people that are not the politically connected, like you and me, like the general like taxpayer and stuff like that, not only are we getting nailed by taxes, but we're getting nailed by this inflation, while the politically connected are still like, enriching themselves further by getting that money first. By the time that we wind up seeing more of this money, like in the form of like wages increasing and stuff like that, that money has already, been like used in the economy or whatever. And we're just going to like the prices have already increased before we see it. Right. So we're just left with less wealth essentially because the dollar gets devalued. And what he's saying here, he's saying that there's less of that effect in a monarchy because the incentives line up such that the monarch knows that he has this, line of heirs or whatever, his family are going to be taking over what he has. And that includes the money that he has. And he doesn't want that money to become so devalued that he has nothing in that respect to leave to his heirs, whether it be like the money that he's taking from taxes or whatever else. So he's going to want to, he's actually incentivized to maintain the value of that money more so he may print less of the money and devalue the money less than what will happen in the democratic government, where they're just extremely extremely high time preference to the point where they just are incentivized to spend it right away.
Yep.
If that all makes sense.
Yeah. All right, man. Let's drop plugs. Get out of here.
All right. I'm Toad at Tower Gang Toad now, as we rebranded. We are the Tower Gang Podcast. That's me, Jose, Fat Dave, aka Cole, Clint from Liberty Lockdown, TopLobsta, and sometimes Reed Coverdale. And we hit episode 100 last night. We did a little bit of a longer episode, did a lot in that episode. It was fun times. It's offensive comedy, so if you're into that, go check that out. Wednesdays at 9-11 p.m. Formerly Tower Power Hour, now the Tower Gang.
Yeah, we're getting all professional over there. We even got a producer now that works the behind the scenes stuff.
That's right. We have Little Dicky.
Yeah, we have our own young Jamie, just like Rogan. Hey, pull that up. We got one of those now. So it's making the show flow a lot better. That episode home was a banger. I really that was a good episode. So I highly suggest people check that out. Also, I'd suggest if you haven't already, go check out my episode with Patriot J, my 4 Pony Boys. I do my 4 Pony Boys. You guys, if you follow the channel, you know. It's the 4 Pony Boys are me, TopLobsta, Reed Coverdale, and Clint Russell. We don't always, not all of them show up to every episode, but we'll usually bring up another guy. So it'll be 5, or one of them will drop out and be 4. But we had Patriot J for this one, and Patriot J was only able to do like an hour, and they had to leave. And then Jason Rink, the documentary filmmaker, he showed up, and he was also the guy, we talked a lot about Ye in that episode, who drove Ye to the airport and was hung out with him basically all night. It was kind of cool. He gave his story. It was the first place he talked about it. I suggest checking it out. That was a really good episode. Also, Olivia Rondo, she's a Fox News contributor, showed up as well, because that's Patriot J's girlfriend. She shot the shit with us for a minute. Bounce. I highly suggest checking it out. It was a really good one. I really enjoyed it. But this is No Way Jose Show. You can find me YouTube, all major audio podcasters, Odyssey as well. If you want to follow me on Twitter at SenorJose2020. You want to support me, patreon.com/NoWayJose2020. Give me those $2, please. Like, share, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. With that, we are out. Appreciate it, everyone who watches this. Love you guys. Bye.